so happy to be here in Southern California at Planet CyberSec. I joined for a February event in Redondo Beach, and it was so fun. And I'm so glad to be here again. I'm Caroline. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt. I actually started my cybersecurity career in 2005. Some of my first information security jobs were leading teams at eBay and Zynga. These were very cool places to be working in cybersecurity. In both cases, we were running online operations 24/7 with millions of simultaneous users daily. eBay had an uptime requirement of 99.94% and is one of the first major electronic commerce shops enabled strangers to transact with each other over the internet. Zynga was growing incredibly rapidly as an early adopter of Amazon AWS. In 2009, the Zynga game Farmville launched, and in just a few weeks, the game went from 0 to 10 million daily active users. A few months later, it rose to 80 million daily active users. I have been obsessed with data and metrics since the start of my career. I brought a copy of my book. I don't want to walk too far because I'm actually attached to this microphone. But anyway, I brought a copy of the book, and if anyone has a question or a comment or something like that, and you want to raise your hand, there is actually going to be an interactive portion to this talk in a little bit. Then I would be delighted to give you this copy of the book. And yeah, so at Cobalt, we do offensive security. We build security software. We do pen testing as a service. So I want to start out by telling you about the first time that I realized that most organizations do not do enough manual pen testing. So between 2013 and 2016, I led more than 36 BSIMM assessments. Are folks familiar with BSIMM, B-S-I-M-M? If you're not familiar with it, go and Google, when you get a chance, BSIMM Foundations Report. It's very cool. BSIMM stands for Building Security and Maturity Model, and it's a descriptive framework for real-life software security. So we, in the cybersecurity industry, we have so many frameworks and best practices and standards, and the vast majority of these are prescriptive. Mostly they tell us what you should do. I think the BSIMM is really cool because it tells you it's an observable descriptive model. So it's more than somebody thinks you should do something or somebody had a good idea. It's someone's actually found the budget and the people and the time to make it an operational active activity. So at any given point, there are more than 100 firms in the latest BSIMM data pool. And this data pool can be thought of as somewhat representative of all the companies in the world that operate using software, but with one little caveat, which is that it costs 5 figures to do a BSIMM. So if you can spend that much money paying a management consultant to fly around the world and interview your software development teams and then give you a scorecard and a set of recommendations on how well you're doing software security, you're probably relatively good at it. So we can assume that the BSIMM data pool is actually above average compared to the rest of the world. So I learned something really startling when I was doing this work, flying around the world, talking to teams about their software development practices. I found out that a typical enterprise with 1,000 software applications was only pen testing about 100 of those applications. Just 10% of enterprise application portfolios were getting manual pen testing. That, to me, is sort of terrifying. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this. Historically, pen testing has been expensive and slow. It is often hard to get access to quality talent, whether you're trying to build an in-house team or work with a third-party provider. I'm not actually ready for my houseplant slide just yet. So at Cobalt, to date, we've actually delivered more than 10,000 manual pen tests. And every year since 2019, we publish a research report called the State of Pen Testing. And in that report, we provide data and analysis from the thousands of manual pen tests that we conducted in the previous year. And we just released our 2023 State of Pen Test report. I'll be sharing some of that with you here. And if you want to check it out, it's like a, 20 or 30 page report, and you can download it for free. So in the 2021 report, we also did a survey And we talked to more than 600 international security folks. And we found out that on average, folks were actually pen testing 63% of their application portfolios. So up from 10%, which is a good thing. Because, and here's my houseplant slide. So what this is supposed to represent, on the left side, it's supposed to say, look, if you have 100 applications in your portfolio and you're only doing manual pen testing for 10 of them, that's not good enough. Even if that percentage increases to 63%, it's still not good enough. And my silly analogy is that, because I think of security testing, I think of security controls as care and feeding for our software applications. And I think that if you're a person and you're responsible for taking care of 100 houseplants, it's unacceptable if you're only watering 10 of them. If you're in charge of taking care of 100 cats, it is unacceptable to provide food and shelter for only 10 of them. So here's another weird data-driven thing. In 2021, our industry got a new OWASP top 10. The very first OWASP top 10 came out in 2003, 17 years prior, and 20 years ago from today. When I put our latest OWASP top 10 right next to the original OWASP top 10, these two are alarmingly similar. And what this says to me is that the most common vulnerabilities that can be found in web applications today, they're actually not so different from 20 years ago. The difference between 2003 and 2021 is a really long time. In 2003, Matthew McConaughey starred in a fantastic film called How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. For folks who are familiar with that film, this is the love fern scene. In 2021, Matthew McConaughey, that same actor, played a singing animated koala in the movie Sing 2. The point being that 2003 was a really long time ago, and yet things haven't changed. Things haven't gotten a lot better, and why is that? I get really frustrated when I think too hard about this. And the reason I get frustrated is because we as an industry know exactly what to do. The OWASP top 10 and the supporting guidance literally provide information on exactly how to find and fix and prevent the most common vulnerability types. And this information, having stayed fairly consistent for nearly 2 decades, is frustrating. In my opinion, the reason is that doing security right is actually just not particularly fun or cheap or convenient to do. I invite you to look at this picture on the left. It's the table of contents for NIST 853. I don't know if any of you have printed out the entirety of NIST 853 onto physical paper, but you get a thick stack of paper. So here's the thing that we like to do in our industry. We like these lengthy frameworks and best practices and standards. And sometimes I think we do ourselves a disservice with these extremely lengthy documents. I think that sometimes this can make cybersecurity actually seem a lot more complicated than it really is, especially to people who aren't security people. I believe that cybersecurity can be simple. Simple does not necessarily mean easy, but simple does mean easier to understand. And so I present to you the modern AppSec framework with literally just 4 things that you need to do. Thing number 1, govern. Just know what your assets are and keep track of them and risk rank them. Thing 2, find security problems. Thing 3, fix the security problems you find. Kind of a crazy idea, right? Thing 4, prevent security problems. If you're interested in a 25-page alternative to the 500-page NIST 853 document, I invite you to Google A Practitioner's Guide to Application Security, where I wrote a little white paper that I like to think is easy to read and accessible and makes sense. And for each of these 4 categories, I talk just one level deeper about some of the activities that are in there. Flipping page. All right, so let's talk about the point of cybersecurity. What is the point of cybersecurity? We're trying to manage risk. Security is about protecting value, and so much of what we value today has shifted from the physical realm to the digital realm. Ultimately, value protection is about risk management. I have 2 lists. This list says we need to manage risk because we care about what other people think. This second list says we need to manage risk because we want to build and maintain and operate software that is resilient to malicious attack. We actually want to secure our software. I teach courses on LinkedIn Learning. I wrote a 40-minute course that's all about these 2 lists. If you want, I invite you to find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, ask me for a link to watch all my LinkedIn Learning courses for free, and that includes this one, which is about security metrics. There's something that we're not getting right. I want to quote my former manager, Sammy Miguez, one of the creators of the BSIM. Sammy says, historically, the industry has not gotten risk management right. Budget-driven risk management is not good enough. So in the next section of this talk, I want to make an observation about 20 years in cybersecurity. We've already kind of done that by looking at the OWASP top 10, and I want to continue. So in 1998, a group of young hackers went to Washington, and they had a warning for Congress. Guess what? Software and computer networks are insecure. During that now infamous hearing in May 1998, one of the hackers told senators that any of the 7 individuals seated before you could take down the internet in just half an hour. In 2018, 20 years later, those same hackers went back to Washington, and they had a similarly bleak assessment. Digital security is hardly any better. Joe Grant, who went by the hacker name Kingpin in his Loft days, said, "At Loft, we tried to be the voice of reason in raising awareness for problems. Nearly all of what we said 20 years ago still holds true. Yes, there have been improvements, but the general class of problems are still the same." Chris Wysopal said, "Back then the threat was the teenage hacker, and now it's nation states. So every vulnerability got a lot more risky." 20 years ago, the threat of nation states and foreign governments with skilled hackers seemed so theoretical, Wysopal said. But we all know now, 20 years later, that this is happening constantly. I read a book last year, and this book is called 4,000 Weeks. And it's written by a productivity author, the type of productivity author who usually writes articles and books about things like, if you brush your teeth while you're in the shower, you will save 5 minutes in the morning. This author wrote the book 4,000 Weeks with a different purpose. The author wants us to know that the average human lifespan is only 4,000 weeks long. Some of us work for these companies that develop software, and they're delivering software every week, every 2 weeks. Can you imagine that a human lifespan is only 4,000 weeks long? I personally have just crossed my 2,000 week mark. And I've spent my entire career working in the cybersecurity field. I intend to spend the rest of my career in the cybersecurity field. And I would really like to see some change. But how do we get change to happen? That was a genuine laugh. How do we fundamentally change this industry and get to a point where we're making meaningful progress? So those are some observations on 20 years in cybersecurity. I want to now look to our good friends in the adjacent space of software development. Because I actually think that for as stagnant as cybersecurity has been over the last 20 years, I actually think that our colleagues on the software development side have made tremendous strides. So in 2011, Puppet released the first State of DevOps report. And just 2 years later, in 2013, the State of DevOps report had established this relationship between a true DevOps practice and high performance outcomes. So organizations that do DevOps have more frequent deployments, shorter time to change, lower change failure rates, and faster time to recovery. This has a direct impact on business outcomes. Organizations that can deploy new code on demand and have shorter lead time to change have a competitive advantage because they can deliver solutions to their customers better. Shorter mean time to recovery and lower change failure rates mean more stable systems. So if companies that are doing DevOps have higher performance outcomes, then naturally, we want to learn about what those companies are doing. And the annual State of DevOps report provides prescriptive advice about what sorts of things work best in their environments. Here's a quote from the State of DevOps report. Security can't be an afterthought or the final step before delivery. It must be integrated throughout the software development process. To securely deliver software, security practices must evolve faster than the techniques used by malicious actors. During the 2020 SolarWinds and CodeCov software supply chain attacks, hackers covertly embedded themselves into the infrastructure of thousands of customers of those companies. Given the widespread impact of these attacks, the industry must shift from a preventive to a diagnostic approach, where software teams should assume that their systems are already compromised and build security into their supply chain. So, it is easy to emphasize the importance of security and suggest that teams need to prioritize it, but doing so requires several changes from traditional information security methods. You can improve security, improve software delivery, and operational performance by doing the following things, says the State of DevOps report. Number one, conduct a security review for all major features. Number two, invite InfoSec early and often. Invite InfoSec during planning and all the subsequent phases of application development so they can spot security-related weaknesses early, which gives the team ample time to fix them. The State of DevOps report also found that teams with high-quality documentation were 3.8 times as likely to integrate security through their development process. Not everyone in an organization has expertise in cryptography, and the expertise of those who do is best shared in an organization through documented security practices. So, what did software development do that was so cool? They moved from on-premise into the cloud. You used to have to rent a data center. You used to have to power a data center. You used to have to buy servers and install servers and operate those servers all by yourself. And it cost a lot of money up front. And now you can just buy stuff in the cloud. And it's flexible and it's on demand. And you just use what you need. So at Cobalt, what we tried to do was we thought to ourselves, how can we incorporate some of the good things about cloud and about SaaS into manual security activities? How can we deliver high-quality security talent on demand in an elastic fashion when you need it? I want to tell you a little bit about our latest state of pen testing. To date, we've delivered, I think I mentioned this, more than 10,000 manual pen tests, and the state of pen testing talks about data from 3,100 pen tests that were done in 2022 across web, API, mobile, network, cloud configuration. That's a data pool of 16,000 findings from companies of various sizes and various industries, SaaS, insurance, and fintech being some of the most popular ones. From all over the world, companies in EMEA, APAC, North America, South America. In addition to the pen test data, we also surveyed more than 1,000 international cybersecurity professionals none of whom are Cobalt customers, from companies that are all 200 plus, because we wanted to get a well-rounded data set. So get ready, because here's the interactive portion. What can you tell me about this picture?
Trending down.
What's trending down? Take a moment. There's a lot to this picture, because what it talks about is pen test findings, and when those pen test findings get fixed. Because one of the cool things about doing pen testing in a SaaS way is we're not just about helping our customers to find security problems, we also want to help them get stuff fixed. So whether it takes them a day or 6 months or 9 months to actually remediate the vulnerabilities that are found, when they do that, they go into our platform and they press a little button that says, this is ready for retest, so that we can retest it and see if it's indeed been fixed. So we have this data, and it is from a bunch of different companies of various sizes. The different colored lines represent different company sizes. And then the x-axis across the bottom talks about the severity of each finding that was found. Any takeaways? Yes.
It looks like if I put colors right, that smaller companies fix more than the bigger companies.
Weird, right?
I wouldn't think that.
It's weird. It's a little unexpected. You win a book. You already have this book, but you get a second book. So anyway, it's weird, and we have some theories about this. Why is it that a smaller company fixes stuff faster than a big company? Is it because when your company is only 100 people big and you know the person who's doing the development and you can just look at them and say, hey, Susan, can you just fix this thing? Maybe that's easier than trying to navigate an employee organizational chart that's like 10,000 people and international big. Maybe it's because big companies tend to have old software. Maybe small companies tend to have new software that's not so complex. Maybe it was born in the cloud. Maybe it's actually fundamentally easier to fix because it's not written in COBOL or whatever. Any other thoughts? We have like a bunch of analysis and you can read it, but I thought, you know what, here's what I'm gonna ask everyone to do. Can you just like stand up for a second? Can you stand up? Please indulge me. Please consider indulging me. It is 4 o'clock. It's been a long day. We're talking about a lot of technical stuff. Frankly, we're talking about some depressing stuff. So thanks for standing up and just consider shaking. Just consider it. Just consider stretching. Oh. Consider just sighing. Oh. All right, that feels better. And I got to do it because all of you considered and actually stood up with me. Thank you. Maybe the smaller companies have less software, less vulnerabilities. Maybe it's easier to fix a smaller percentage of vulnerabilities. Maybe there's a cultural thing at smaller companies where people take ownership in a way and get excited about doing this type of stuff that, is not as common at bigger organizations. Bigger companies, more dependencies, and I also think that bigger companies tend to outsource software development. So if you're the type of company that's outsourcing all of your software development, then you're likely paying your third-party software developer a big chunk of money to make the thing. And then if you go back to them and you say, oh, we found some vulnerabilities, now I need you to fix them, they're gonna say, great, let me write you up a new statement of work. Here's another depressing slide. So we had the pen test data, and we also had the survey data. And we said, hey folks, whose companies are experiencing layoffs and who's experiencing budget cuts? And when this is affecting security teams, what's really not convenient about it is that means that fewer security vulnerabilities are getting fixed because there's less human power to help shepherd those through the remediation process. That's basically what this slide says. This is as bad as this deck gets, by the way. So anyway, here we're back to our happy path, our funny path for the talk. I work for a company. We do a lot of pen testing. We observe lots of different organizations at different stages in pen test maturity. And for organizations that want to get more strategic, I have 3 pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is to do pen testing faster and more often. So when does an organization need a pen test? Usually it's because of one or more of a handful of reasons. Thing 1, there's a customer who says, I need to see a pen test report before I commit to buying your product. Thing 2, there's a regulator who says, I need to see a pen test report because of this regulatory compliance exercise. Thing 3, you're getting acquired, or maybe you're getting merged, and the company that's either buying yours or combining with yours wants to see the results of a pen test before they complete the transaction and add your risk profile to theirs. Thing 4, you've just deployed a new feature or an entirely new product, and you want to find and fix security vulnerabilities before they can be exploited by malicious actors. Crazy talk, right? In any case, one way to get strategic with scaling your pen test program is simply to start faster. What I mean is, when you've decided that you need to do a pen test, get technical experts performing manual pen test activities right away, like within 24 hours. This was not possible 10 years ago, but it is today. You can get really high quality pen testers working on manual pen tests within 24 hours of when you need it. And it's important because the sooner you start, the sooner you have a final pen test report in the hands of the person who is demanding it. It also means that you're that much closer to knowing about exploitable vulnerabilities in your software, and the sooner you know about them, the sooner you can fix them. And then the sooner you can start your next pen test, because the product and engineering teams are just gonna keep building new things. And if those new things aren't getting properly security tested, then it's possible that they're vulnerable. Advice number 2. Remediate risk. One very silly thing that I have observed through my 18-year career working in InfoSec is that a lot of compliance regimes and best practices frameworks will recommend that you do some type of defect discovery. It'll say, do a pen test, run a scan, but then they don't require that you fix what you found. That is infuriating to me. When I talk about scaling pen testing, I don't just mean print a PDF, give it to a regulator, check the box, and move on with the rest of your day. I mean, find security vulnerabilities in your applications and then fix them. Now, don't get me wrong, fixing vulnerabilities is hard. Most of the time, if you're a security person, fixing vulnerabilities actually involves getting someone else to do something. And getting other people to do stuff is hard. I can think of a way that does not work. If I get a 50-page PDF in my email and I forward it to an email alias of engineering managers and I say, here are the results from our pen test that we did, please work with your teams to get the findings remediated, then maybe what happens is they don't even open my email. They just see it, cortisol runs through their body, and then they just move on to whatever they were going to do next. It might be better if, as soon as a finding is discovered, the engineering team finds out through Slack, or however it is that they talk to each other. And then maybe it goes into Jira, or whatever ticketing system, where a ticket has been submitted and that can be worked right away. It would even be cool if there were a direct line of communication between the engineer and the pen tester who found the issue in the first place. So they could talk to each other, they could ask questions and give advice and work together to get those security vulnerabilities addressed. I have been obsessed with security data and metrics since the start of my career. I think that better data enables us to make better decisions and achieve better outcomes. At this late stage in the cybersecurity game, Let's remember that hackers testified before the US Senate in 1998. We should have a ton of pen test data. And in theory, that could actually help us a lot. If the pen test data is in a standardized format that can be organized and accessed through an API, then you can actually analyze the data. You can actually use it. For years, I've heard people say, yeah, the OWASP top 10 is good and all, but what's really important is your organization's top 10, or your organization's top 5, or your organization's top 3. But not that many organizations have their security metrics to a maturity level where they even know what their top 3 classes of security vulnerabilities are. I'm skipping because we're kind of running out of time. So here is a fun fact. When I was 6 years old, the first ever ransomware attack directed users to mail $189 to a PO address in Panama. The thing that really gets me is, in 2021, there was Colonial Pipeline, there was JBS, and I find myself in all sorts of conversations, and media and journalists are asking, what are they doing? What are we gonna do? And the part that gets me is how simple it truly is to prevent ransomware. If we could just get our act together and know our assets and keep track of them, and I don't know, test them for vulnerabilities, patch them, update them, if we could just make backups and then make sure those backups work, we actually wouldn't be susceptible to ransomware. The first freaking attack happened in 1989. Last year, the average ransomware payment was nearly $5 million. When the first ransomware attack happened in 1989, I was 6 years old. This is a photo of my daughter at 6 years old. And when she's 40, I don't want us talking about the same types of security vulnerabilities that we are talking about today. If we don't start turning the situation around right now, it's just gonna get worse. I want the world to be a safe place for my daughter and for my grandchildren. I want their energy sources to be reliable, and I want their food processing plants to be safe and operational. I want their computers and the internet to be a place where they can connect and create. It is time for us to do better, and I believe that we can. I have tremendous hope, but no one's gonna do it for us. There is no software program or machine learning or AI that can do it for us. We actually have to decide that we want to do this, and then we just have to do it. It's not gonna be easy, but it is simple. We just need to work together, security people and engineers, to collaboratively decide that it is important enough to get asset inventory right. We just have to decide it's important enough to update our software and install patches when software is vulnerable. We just have to decide to look for security vulnerabilities that we know are exploitable and then find them and then fix them. And this is something that we can only do together. It is time. That's that. I'm Caroline. Let's connect. I'm on LinkedIn. Here's my email address. I would love any question or feedback. I think we have like 3 minutes.
Yeah, you have a few minutes for Q&A.
When you said there's no system that can do this, you, to some extent, can start automating pen testing through AI, right?
Automation is very important.
Okay, all right.
And the best pen testers in the world use tools and automation. I don't know a pen tester that doesn't use Burp Suite. But Burp Suite alone will not do it. Yes, but I'm like all for automation. Automate everything you possibly can so that we can use our human brains, our judgment, our creativity, our innovation on solving hard problems. Great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what he said. And your whole presentation, you spoke about manual pen testing. Why is it not automatic pen testing 24/7? Why do you have to initiate it?
To my knowledge, automatic pen testing cannot find certain things,
like business logic flaws, like chained exploits, like race conditions. I think we're getting close, and maybe at some point in time we will be able to, but there are entire classes of vulnerabilities that require humans to find it. A computer is not going to determine that when you go through a forgot your password flow, if it forgets to check against a previously validated, provided answer to a security question. No automatic security check will do that for you. That was a weird example. Did that make sense to folks? You forget your password. This happens to us like every day. I forget my password, and I go, and it says, I forgot my password. And it says, great. What's your email address? Here's my email address. And it says, okay, you know, what's your dog's name? And I say, you know, Newton. Newton's my dog. And if the software doesn't check and say, the last time I asked Caroline this, when I validated her identity the last time, I collected this information and I'm going to check it, if it just lets me in, that's not a coding bug. That's a design flaw. And AI can't find that. We could have this discussion all day long, and we had a version of it. So we've been doing these state of pen test reports for years. Our 2020 state of pen test report does a deep dive into this like human versus machine question. Specifically, it looks at a human pen tester versus DAS scanning for web applications. And spoiler alert, the DAS scanner finds a bunch of stuff, including false positives. And spoiler alert, the human finds a bunch of stuff, and maybe not everything. The real value, of course, comes in the both combined. Yes?
Earlier, we were talking about bigger company, right? They have hard time to really do pen testing. So you run into a situation that there are a bunch of programmers that they come from a legacy background, right? Legacy in a programming background. The programming could be 40 years old or 50 years old, and they're still using it, right? But the security people do not have the experience, do not have anything. They do not know anything about that particular legacy, system. So how do you really? I mean, how can we help them to make sure they're secure? They're.
So that's tough. And I think that
who's gonna do the job here?
Yeah. So if there's a question, if I can repeat the question and see if I understand it correctly. Say you've got a group of developers, and they've been coding for 40, 50 years on legacy stuff, and your security people aren't familiar with that tech stack. They're not familiar with that language. What do you do? There's concepts that I believe are applicable across. Now, the problem's going to happen when the security goes to the developer and is like, hey, have you heard about the principle of least privilege? And they're going to be like, yeah. So that's difficult. I think that the best way is actually if the security person can say to the developer with true interest and curiosity, tell me about what you've built. Tell me about what you're doing with it. Teach me about your software. Because I think that the more that we as security people can get developers talking about their code, even if we don't understand that specific language, that specific tech stack, we have an opportunity to look for opportunities to try and teach folks security concepts. Great question. And I think we might be out of time, but I so appreciate you all being here with me. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.